Snowy peaks and open skies, northern winds whisper goodbyes. Dreams take root where the maples grow, a land of promise where rivers flow. Welcome to the north, where the light shines so bright, chasing every dream beneath the stars tonight. Every step you take, a journey to belong, building futures here where hearts grow strong. Lakes like mirrors, reflecting pride, from the Rockies to the ocean tide. Voices mingle in a tapestry, a world united in heart.
Hello, everyone. How's it going? We got a new little intro song, thanks to AI-generated magic. We're back at another Canadian Immigration Live Q&A this Wednesday, March the 26th. How are you doing, Alicia?
I'm doing okay, Mark. It's there's been a lot going on. So yeah, this weekend we actually drove 2.5 hours out to the mountains. We went cross-country skiing. There's no snow here. There's no snow in Calgary. There's no snow like, Kananaskis. There's just a little tiny bit, but we had to go pretty far, and we went pretty far, and we found some amazing snow. It was just what the doctor ordered: get out and ski for 2 hours in the mountains. So it was great.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah, it has been a very, very busy run here for us. And we know that all of the people that are watching these lives, the vast majority of you are, it's a pretty stressful time for you. And every time I go live, I just have this tremendous feeling of compassion for all the people that are trying to figure out if there's the possibility of a future in Canada still. When all the cards are stacked against you, we definitely try to be, I guess, the wild card in your card of in your deck of cards, and we try to help and support and do whatever we can to give you the advice that you guys need to make good decisions and to be aware of the options that are available. So it has been definitely an interesting week. Finally, after much waiting, there's no anticipation because no one really wanted this to come. But the day is finally here where the job offer points within the express entry system are officially gone. So if we look now to the comprehensive ranking system here, and those of you who have active profiles should have seen or received an email notification indicating that that your profile scores would be adjusting over the next couple days. But you can see here, they no longer give points for job offers as of yesterday, March the 25th. And that includes both the 200 for senior executives as much as the 50 for the other occupations. And, if you want to go back to our YouTube channel, Igor and I yesterday did a very, very long, it was a 2-part because my internet cut out, Alicia, partway through.
Oh, no.
But we had a 2-part, breaking news on no more LMIAs, and so yeah, it's this says that it's that this part 2 is was coming and to notify, but the reality is we actually did. Part 1 should be here. I don't know where it is. Maybe it just disappeared into the sunset. Oh no, here's the first one. Okay, you just have to go into here where it's been saved. But part 1. And then here's part 2. You can catch up on that. And we covered at length, basically this stuff right here, Alicia. And I'll just see if I can share my screen and I'll add you in here. So if you haven't had a chance, there we go, bring Alicia on. If you haven't had a chance to watch that video, we basically talked about the job offer points gone, what changed, why RCC removed the points, who the winners were, the losers, what this means for the future of express entry, and some strategic advice for you candidates. So if you haven't had a chance to go back and watch these videos, No More LMIA Points. And once again, there's 2 parts to it. So go check out part 1 and part 2. And we cover that in length. So it is what it is. And I know that a lot of you probably have questions and about, what we think is going to happen. Igor and I did a lot of this, Alicia. We did a lot of this yesterday, crystal balling what we think is going to happen and what we can project going forward. So that's always fun. And I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunities to bring the crystal ball right back to us. Those of you who are tuning in for the first time, please post a comment indicating where you're tuning in from. And we love to see how far these little live streams reach. And, Alicia, I went back as I was making some changes to a few of the social media things we were doing. I looked back to see how far it was when I launched my first podcast episode. And it was actually July of 2014. And so in that time, we have been, I think we're up to about 164. 64 will be released today, but 164 episodes of the Canadian Immigration Podcast. But in that time, I discovered video, this format. And as a result of that, if we go to the YouTube channel and we look here, some people have like 1,000 podcast episodes, but the reality is we have 985 videos that have been generated on the Canadian Immigration Institute YouTube channel. And we're just about to 65,000 subscribers. And I discovered that visually I could present things in a more educative manner than I could on the podcast. So there was a period of time where I kind of let the podcast kind of drift a little bit. And so we don't have the same number of episodes, but boy, am I proud of this Canadian Immigration Institute. And it would not be possible without your help and Igor's help and Prem and everyone. And so it's just a wonderful opportunity to share information, to help, a large number of people all at the same time, and to use all of, the good things that we have from our experience and our education, and basically just interacting with all of you on a daily basis. So it looks like Philip liked the new intro song, which we have, and I'll play that on the way out as well for those of you who didn't get a chance to listen to it. But it's amazing what AI can generate. Absolutely amazing. So very cool. Okay, so let's see who's here. So do post where you're tuning in from. We've got Tom. Hey, Tom was on yesterday. Greetings from Brockville, Ontario. Great to have you, Tom. You were attending our Igor and my live yesterday. Juan V, good to have you. Let's see who else we've got tuning in here. And those of you who are posting
Red Deer.
We got Red Deer. Yeah, we've got Sanjay's over in Mississauga. And we've got Bezad is over in Vancouver. Welcome, Bezad. Yep, Abhishek up there in Red Deer. Good to see you, Abhishek. And let's see who else we've got. So if this is your first time, please post a comment. So what has changed? Well, we've talked about the job offer points. We're waiting to see if they're going to do a round of invitations. And I think you guys, for all intents and purposes, I think they're going to be probably taking that a little bit slower. So I'm not anticipating a round of invitations this week as they work out all the bugs and the kinks with essentially removing a critical component of express entry, which is a really, really large part of what the point system and how it was, how the points were distributed in the past. So it'll take some time. Right off the bat here, if we pull up the first comment, so Ali says, what do you predict CRS to go down to now that job offer points are removed? Also, is it possible to go from LMIA to study permit and continue education? I had a consult just yesterday, Alicia, with someone who was asking that question. And one of the questions was, can I keep studying? In this case, they're on a QET work permit. I want to go and get my CPA. I want to continue with my accounting. And so I can take kind of more virtual part-time classes in school.
Yeah.
And so can I apply for a study permit was the question, to study part-time while I have a work permit. And the short answer is yes, you can. The challenge is, as long as you don't need a postgrad or need to work on the basis of that study permit off campus. So I don't think there's any restrictions on someone holding a study permit and studying part-time, as long as they're not they're not trying to work or anything off campus otherwise. And maybe you've had different experiences with that, Alicia, but the
Yeah.
instructions indicate you can have full-time or part-time as long as you're not stretching it.
Yeah, my concern with those situations, like I just wish, you know how they had the construction worker announcement and they
Mhm.
said, hey, if you're doing trades and you want to do trades education, you're exempted from needing a work permit. Well, great.
Yeah.
But I wish they would have some sort of clear policy guidance on what if you're
Mhm.
doing your professional designation? What if you're trying to do a CPA? What if you're trying to do any other sort of designation that is not trades? And the difficulty in a study permit is that normally you have to be studying full time and you have to be studying at a designated learning institution. And so if it's not a DLI, and like a lot of the schools that are giving
Yeah,
designations
not.
for professionals are not designated learning institutions, it's through a professional association, something like that. And there's a really large gray area here. And so I wish
Mhm.
IRCC would provide some more guidance.
Yeah. And one thing we talked about as well, when you're studying full time, you can't gain points. Yeah, well, you can't get
Right.
credit for your Canadian work experience, but in that's full time studies is what the section within the legislation reads. And so studying part time, does that remove the ability to count? I don't think so. So it's an interesting area, and as when I we reason through this with a client, it was definitely it was really sad, doubly sad, Alicia, because they had worked really hard. Her employer had supported her, and on March the 24th they got their LMIA approved, and
Mm,
it was a job, it was a permanent LMIA just for the purposes of permanent residence. So the next day, all that work just poof, up in the air. All right. So Ali says, are the points, what's going to happen with these points? Are they going down? So I'll pull up the crystal ball, Alicia, and then we'll slide over to the rounds of invitations here. And I welcome your thoughts. Okay, let's move our crystal ball over here. So the latest round, French language proficiency, was back on March the 21st of last week. Massive 7,500 round of invitations. But if we go to the previous rounds here and we look, you can see that it has been a while since we've had a CEC, and that's a big
yeah.
determiner. So 4,521 back on February the 5th, which we're closing in on almost 2 months.
Yeah.
So if we have that, Alicia, and we're looking at the score distribution, at least on the 16th, which was the last time, we know there's more people in here. What would you predict the score to be? How many of these 25,522 people, or even up here, are holders of that, those 50 points, which are now gone? So what do you
Yeah.
think is going, what's the world going to look like? What do you think?
Yeah, like my guess would be that's going to clear out a significant portion. Like I think that the 501 to the 600 range goes down to maybe like 8,000 people. Like I don't think
Mm-hmm.
I think most people when they lose those 50 points for arranged employment are going to fall from that 501 bracket to the 451 to the 500 bracket. And maybe that's why IRCC has never bothered updating their breakdowns of brackets because they knew they're taking away the points. They know they're kind of putting downward pressure on the whole system so that points go into the lower ranges again.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder, like in retrospect, I think that probably they haven't done a CEC draw for the last 2 months because they wanted to clearly process everybody on that February 5th draw or as much as possible before that moves over and they're starting to look at the next round of invitations in the whole new world of not having job offer points.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's see here. We've got a few questions. All right. Batman, welcome. We got our superheroes back in town. It says, my wife's outside postgrad work permit was approved last November. She's currently searching a Canadian job while remaining in the US on her H4. by when she should have to activate her postgrad before the end date of her POE letter. So we can maybe, like this one, we always will ring our little triangle here, Batman, because we want to talk to you and understand exactly what you have going on. So we recommend you book a consult. But generally speaking, Alicia, when someone has applied online for their work permit and they're coming from a visa required country, so they have the visa, and then there's an introduction letter that is granted. What's the last date typically when they have to come to complete their the actual work permit finalization at the POE?
Yeah, well, definitely before the end date of that letter, right? So if you've got your acceptance and you have a visa issuance, hopefully you actually have the visa counterfoil in your wife's passport, and then make sure that the passport's going to be valid for the whole time of the PGWP. Same thing for accompanying family members, for spouse or kids. Make sure that they have visitor visa counterfoils in the passports, as well as passports that are going to be valid the whole time. But yeah, you'll want to make sure that everybody travels before the expiry date of that approval letter. And so if it was last November, I believe they're usually 6 months. So you're looking at probably pretty soon.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's shift gears to security and background checks. So in a PR application, in the comprehensive security check, do they validate employment that is not claimed for points? I can kind of tackle that one, and by that stage, if there's no points being claimed, I'm assuming this is what you would have put in your personal history section if it was express entry. They have no need or desire to dig into employment that is not a part of the actual minimum entry criteria, or in the case of express entry, the CRS points. However, if they have any reason to believe anything that you've submitted isn't true, and you've entered any information in that's incorrect, you could be subject to, the possibility of a misrepresentation allegation. So obviously, I'm assuming you're you're entering the correct information in, but if you say can't prove it or don't have a reference letter, that's not an issue, because it's only that work history that you're claiming points for. Anything to add,
Except,
Alicia, to this one? Mm.
yeah, except and unless you worked for a company that was doing something that's security sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
So something in military intelligence,
Fair enough.
something
Yep.
in cybersecurity, something in um, there are certain industries that are more security sensitive. And so IRCC has actually released a list of um, educational institutions sometimes that people were a part of overseas that have higher scrutiny. And so I'm assuming as well, if you are working for an employer that was in a high security or a security sensitive area, that could be something that they would investigate further.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next on our list here, Diane says, "Hi, Mark and Alicia. Just want to verify for the Francophone mobility work permit. Does the employer need to prove the company needs French-speaking employees to be eligible for this?"
So, Dan, you can go to the IRCC website. They have actually a decent page on employment requirements. So, for the employer who wants to hire somebody under Mobilité Francophone, and then for the employee who wants to apply for that Mobilité Francophone work permit. And of course, that first stage is the employer portal offer. And so the company basically has to show they're offering this job. And so it goes through how to apply. There are different rules because they changed the NCLC level score. It used to be 7. They moved it down to 5 in June of 2023. And then this is the fact where the Canadian employer has to go through. They have to provide this employer portal offer. And then there's another page too that talks about more specifically what the employers need to do when they're supporting somebody on an Mobilité Francophone. And that's where you would cross-reference to make sure that the employer is providing all the necessary information. They have to have that employer portal account. They've got to have a business number. They have to confirm their addresses. They have to show that they've been in operation. They have to have a valid CRA business number. And there should be, some justification for why they're offering the job, but there's no official requirement to show that French is required for the position. Canada is a bilingual country. French and English are both official languages across the country. The only thing for Mobilité Francophone is that the job cannot be in the province of Quebec. So make sure that it's specified that the work is not going to be occurring in offices or in a location inside Quebec. Anywhere outside is fine.
Yes. All right. Tom asks this one. We'll bring up the crystal ball. He says, what does your crystal ball say about CUSMA? Are those LMIA exempt work permit pathways going away next? So what do you think, Alicia? This is a great question because we know that the U.S. is becoming very isolationist and is moving away from treaties and from trade and trying to, make America great again by not, really, I guess, extending, trade opportunities and relations with other countries. Although it's the worst decision in the world. No country in the world who's ever decided to just focus on themselves and build everything internally has ever been able to succeed without being a good trading partner internationally. That's the direction they're going to go. And CUSMA is a part of the Canada-US-Mexico agreement. So I don't know what your thoughts. Obviously, this is pure crystal ballish stuff here, Alicia. But
Yeah,
what do
I
you
mean,
think?
it's been so hard, Mark. I'm trying not to get absorbed into the news feeds, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's pretty bleak out there right now. And I was reading last night, there was a Globe and Mail article on what US immigration lawyers are recommending for their Canadian clients who happen to be in the US, and things are getting a little bit dicey. So they're actually saying they've heard reports of Canadians not being allowed to re-enter the US, even if they had valid work permits.
Mm-hmm.
They've had, there's a few instances of Canadians getting thrown in immigration detention for 12 days. So if we're seeing this kind of pushback from the US and from border officials, um, that is seriously concerning. And we know, or we've heard, of course, that the government in the US is wanting to renegotiate CUSMA sooner rather than later. They have to do so before
Yeah.
2026, but arguably they've already breached a whole bunch of provisions of the Canada-US-Mexico Free Trade Agreement with everything that's going on with tariffs. And so um, in the last round of negotiations, so last time when Trump was in power, he was the one who did the renegotiation on CUSMA, and some of the provisions changed, but it was more with respect to goods. Most of the provisions with respect to people, so the transfer of people back and forth in terms of who can get a work permit if you're a Canadian working in the US or a US citizen working in Canada or Mexico, those things largely stayed the same. So, um, you know, the world has changed quite a bit since 2016, and we will have to see. I know we have a number of large corporate clients who are multinational companies who are pretty concerned about what's going on and trying to figure out, what will happen with their operations if they won't have the same LMIA exempt pathways under free trade agreements available to them. So it's a legitimate concern.
Yes. All right, let's jump down. I'm just going to pull this one up, Sarab, for you. I don't know really how much we can add to this one. He said, what do you think about the OINP employer job offer at federal skilled, basically worker draw anticipation? What might be the cutoff? Well, this is something Ontario has been inundated with people, right? So let's remove our crystal ball here. And if you're looking through this, it's been a long time since they have done one of these draws. So if we go back, like when was the last one? Target. If we go just simple general draw right here, you can see that the last general draw that they did was way back in January 19th, 2024. And there was 1,654. So the scores were 50 and above. And then if you go up here, you can see the targeted draws, even within the targeted draws, you can see how high those numbers are. And so when and how much, it's just really hard for us to say. I don't really have an answer other than things are slow. I don't know. What did Ontario end up getting, Alicia? Did the feds say, hey, you guys have been taking your fair share of asylum seekers, refugees, and so therefore we're going to give you your full quota? Maybe you can take a look and see what we can find on that one, because I'm not sure.
Or one of the
Okay.
listeners from Ontario can jump in and tell us
Yeah, one
because
of
I
our
have to
listeners
go
in
try to
Ontario can
find it.
say, what's the current allocation for Ontario? So Zola says, arrange job offer, LMI exempt, help Canadian market benefit. Okay. Most of the people are old. Will this measure just be temporary? I think is the indication. Well, we don't know. I think it is going to be temporary in nature, but how long, we're just uncertain. If we go to the ministerial instructions for express entry, which are brand new here.
Well, and the interesting thing is on the MIs as well. So this was not released until yesterday, but it was actually signed March
Yeah,
11th by Mark Miller before he left.
you bet.
So they had this all teed up and queued up and ready to
They
go,
did.
but they just didn't release it publicly.
Yeah. Well, you can see here, Section 1 has been repealed, but the definition for qualifying offer of arranged employment, it's still here. So the whole section wasn't just removed. So it's a relatively easy thing for them to just reactivate Section 29 sub 1 here to start issuing those. So we'll just see, but they do leave this for the, and remember, these are the ministerial instructions for the purposes of express entry. This doesn't touch on, which another thing I wanted to address, if we go back to the criteria here, I'm just trying to see where it says what isn't changing. This part right here confirms that for the selection criteria for the Federal Skilled Worker Program and the Federal Skilled Trade Program and some PNPs, that the job offer that you have to get those points under the selection factors is still alive and well. So if you're applying for the Federal Skilled Worker Program, the FSW, if you're applying for that program, and if you are trying to calculate the selection factor points, you'll see that under the arranged employment, this is still here. So the job offer provisions are still here for the 10 points here, and then adaptability has another 5 points that's available for work experience in Canada, past work in Canada, and past work, the spouse's past work, and 5 for arranged employment. So this is where the government is just reiterating that, okay, yes, it's gone, but only for the comprehensive ranking system. So you're not getting those extra points. So people say, well, what do I do? How do I fill this out? Well, you fill it out as normal when you're, indicating whether or not you have a job offer, even though, you're not getting those 50 or extra 200 points. It's still, it's going to factor in for your eligibility to get into the pool. All right. Bazad says, does a demand letter impact the speed of the process? I mean, after 20 months. Alicia, what are your thoughts on that?
I assume Bazad means he's going to issue a demand letter and try to get the process moving.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it depends on what kind of application you submitted. So we know that express entry, specific applications, if that's taking 20 months, that is for sure a long period of processing time. And there's something amiss. They're doing security or background checks, or there's maybe some sort of allegation of inadmissibility or misrepresentation, because it shouldn't take an express entry file 20 months. Processing standard is 6 months, and 20 months is way over that. If you're in a non-express entry linked stream, though, if you are in a PR PNP portal kind of type of application, then that might be a situation where it could take 20 months. The average processing time is much closer to a year, and sometimes there's things that slow down that file if you added a family member or change in family composition or something else happened.
Yeah.
So it might be that you are in a situation where you want to talk to a lawyer about mandamus or trying to ask for a demand letter. But that's the first stage, is to say, hey, processing on this is taking way longer than normal. Make sure, though, that the ball is not in your court, because sometimes what happens is that it's actually you. You forgot to upload a document, or IRCC has a question because they asked you for something and you didn't actually provide it. And so go back and double check. You can do an access to information and privacy request and make sure that it's not you that's slowing down the processing, because you have to take a look at what was the last material step that IRCC made and how long has it been since their last material step. And then you can go ahead and get a lawyer, talk to them about that demand letter. And if they don't answer within a reasonable period of time, then that's where you can look at a mandamus application at federal court.
Anand says, if an officer was concerned about discrepancies or other issues in personal history specifically, would they tell you in the GCMS notes?
Probably not, unless they're actually making a misrep finding, or if they decide that they're going to send you a procedural fairness letter. So normally, you won't hear about this ahead of time. It would only be if they say, hey, we believe that there's something going on in your file, and we're sending you either an additional document request. So they say, fill out your 5669 again. That's always a red flag, right? If they say, we need an updated 5669 on your express entry file or your PR file, please talk to a lawyer, because there's probably something going on. If they send you a procedural fairness letter, that normally means that they are about to refuse your application or say that they believe that there is misrepresentation. And then that's your basically last chance to respond to their concerns. But you don't want to wait until you're at the stage of a procedural fairness letter. If you think that there are material discrepancies in your application, you want to deal with that head on. The only way to do it is normally through a web form, and you want to fix that. You want to be proactive and disclose if you know that you have something wrong on your file. You have an obligation to correct misinformation.
Mm-hmm. All right. Noah says, what should my English score be? I have an average of 10, but a score of 6 for reading. I did poorly this time for some reason. Speaking, writing are 11. Do I need to retest?
Yeah, and so maybe Mark, you can pull up
Mm-hmm.
the chart that shows the comparison between IELTS and CELPIP and how that relates to a Canadian language benchmark. And because your scores are 10 and 11, I'm assuming that you probably did the CELPIP exam, but there are different ways to calibrate these test results. So the language tests are here, and then there's a chart that's going to take you to what does this mean? So if you go, you can understand that there's different language requirements for CEC versus federal skilled worker. So if you are only eligible for the federal skilled worker program, then that 6 is deadly. If it's a CLB equivalent 6, then it means that you're not going to be eligible for the category if you're not hitting that CLB language benchmark. But it depends on which test you took. So take a look at the CLB equivalency. So there are actually, and I don't know where, I think
Mm-hmm.
it links through here, but there's another CLB equivalency page that'll
Oh,
give you a
yeah.
breakdown for IELTS turning into CLB and then CELPIP
Mm-hmm.
turning into CLB, um, because that matters. So if you're only eligible for federal skilled worker, you have to get a CLB level 7 in all language categories. If you are,
There
there
it
we go,
is.
this is what I want. Yeah, so if you're at a CELPIP and you're getting a CELPIP level 6 on your writing, that means that your CLB level is also a 6 and you are falling below what the minimum language requirement eligibility is for FSW. CEC is a little bit different. So you could have a CLB level 6 on writing under CEC, but it's going to
Mm-hmm.
really drag down your scores. And
Yep.
so I would say, yes, it is always important to go and try to practice and study and retest and make sure that you try to get as high a mark as possible on all of your language categories, because it really makes a difference in your score. The other thing that I will say, especially when you look at IELTS, some people figure, oh, I just did poorly on the writing. If you go back up to the top of that web page on language tests that they accept in that little, there you go. If you scroll down to the middle of the page, Mark, like right where the table
Yep.
is, language tests we accept, you can see where it says IELTS. You must take the IELTS general training. We don't accept IELTS one skill retake for express entry. So some people say, oh, my writing is really low. Usually it's the writing that's low.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to do, because IELTS offers a one skill retake for some of their IELTS testing.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Understand that that is not going to be worthwhile for immigration, because you can't use that one skill retake for the purposes of an IRCC application. So you have to retake the whole thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and many people don't understand that. It's too bad because if there's one section you're struggling with, you can just focus on that, not having to reprove that that you have good fluency. Okay. Next on our list here. All right. Let's see. Okay, we'll shift gears to Alvaro here. He says, hello, if the photo for the first PR card of the Portal 2 is rejected, is the eco-bar still issued? Or it has to wait until the picture is accepted? Thank you. This is an
That's an
interesting
interesting.
thing. Go ahead, Alicia.
That's an interesting question, Alvaro. Back in the old days, we used to have physical photos, and IRCC could be very particular about those physical photos. If there was shadow, if there was a blur, if people had their head tilted or there were little things wrong with that photo, they could actually return an entire application and say, go get a new photo. And I was always phobic about that. I always wanted to make sure, literally, they had dimensions for the head and chin to crown and all sorts of things, and I would have a little ruler and I'd be out there with my millimeters. But nowadays with digital photos, they tend to be a little bit more lenient, and like, I've not seen immigration refuse photos before, that are digital. And so this is new territory, where try to go and get those new photos corrected. Make sure you go to a proper photographer, um, that's that knows how to take passport-sized photos in Canadian dimensions, and then do a really good quality color scan of that photo. Or sometimes you can take a photo of the photo, pay attention to what the digital size of that photo is and make sure it's within the parameters. Sometimes the resolution is just too low for immigration to be able to upload to their system. But it's a good question whether they will actually land you if they don't have the photo yet. My guess is if it won't fit their system parameters, they won't finalize the e-COPR until they have the new photo.
Yeah. We'll give a shout out here to Noe is in Toronto. We've got Dana who's over in Victoria. Hopefully the weather is nice in Victoria. Levine says greetings from Toronto. We've got Kowal is over in Kelowna. MD Wahidur is joining from Vancouver. Zolo's in Ottawa. We got the whole country covered today, so that's fantastic. Amiz is in Toronto, and Veer is also in Toronto. Dana said Victoria, LOL. Sorry. We've got Ragu is Thunder Bay. And Tom says, I'll be tuning in tonight too. So much going on in immigration. Thanks for reminding me, Tom. So Tom, what Tom is talking about is every Wednesday evening, I have my masterclass for the Canadian Immigration Institute. So you can see when you check our courses and you go to the Express Entry Masterclass, and the link is in the description below. Every 2 weeks, bi-weekly on Wednesdays from 4 to 6, I have the masterclass. And it's more like a webinar almost, but it's almost like a Zoom call with people that join in. So when you subscribe to the course, you have the ability to come back as many times as you want. Every 2 weeks, I do the masterclass, and you have access to the course for life. So Tom, I look forward to seeing you there this evening. Excellent. Let's see. We've got Krishna says hello. Francine is in Edmonton. Basil's on Vancouver Island as well. I wonder if Basil's in Victoria. Let's see. We've got Vinay who's in Brampton, and we've got a good reach. I see we've got people that are tuning in on LinkedIn, etc. So, okay, we got a whole bunch of questions that have piled in. Okay, and we've got our other superheroes here as well. Spider-Man, good to see you connecting in. Let's see, anything else? Okay, all right. So now we'll just keep zipping through our questions here. So hang tight, guys. And one thing I want to identify is that sometimes I don't get to every question. We just run out of time. Other times, the question that you ask may be so specific that it really only benefits you. So, and sometimes, like I said, there's good questions we just don't get to. So if there's any issue or any concern about you having an urgent matter that is really specific to you, we strongly encourage you to slide over to our firm website and book a consultation. So if you are over on our site and you just click on Speak to a Lawyer, it will take you right here where you can connect with Alicia, Igor, and myself. And I think, Alicia, our firm photos are supposed to be ready today, I think, or tomorrow. So we'll see what if Igor's got copies of those, because these our images on our website are going to be updated, which is great. We'll get them all current here. Okay, let's see here. Here's another one, Alicia. See if you're daring enough to tackle this one. Basil says, good morning. Can I work full-time here and claim part-time scores remotely from India at the same time? Does that work?
No, no, you can't. So the rule is that, and this is in the ministerial instructions, and so if you take a look at their definition of Canadian work experience and their definition of foreign work experience, you will see that in order to claim points, it is capped at 30 hours in any given work week. And so you could, if you do it properly, try to claim half time here and half time abroad. And the reason that you might want to try to do that is to get your points for your foreign work experience. If you've already hit your 1 year of Canadian work experience, your second year of Canadian work experience is not going to give you as many points potentially as a full year of foreign work experience. But this is where you need to get really careful and not be too cute. And really take a look at what the risks and benefits of doing that are. Because if you're in Canada and you're here on a work permit, you're burning up time on your work permit if you're only working half-time in Canada. So no, you can't claim full-time in Canada plus another part-time job outside of Canada. You could split half-time in Canada and half-time outside of Canada, but there are risks for doing so. So I would recommend, Basil, that you book a consult and we could discuss.
Okay. All right, next question. This is from Anatoly. Oh, he says, hey, Mark and Alicia and Mark, tuning in from Toronto. Thank you for shedding the light on the latest updates in Canadian immigration landscape. Thanks, Anatoly. Great to have you here. Okay, here's one from Francine. She says, I applied for family reunification outside Canada in refugee category in January 2023. It's been 8 months since my family did the biometrics. Till now, excuse me, nothing has moved forward. Why?
Oh, and Francine, I feel for you because these are really tough situations, especially if you were doing a refugee claim and then family reunification to bring over family from abroad. These applications have long processing times, much longer than economic categories. There tend to be more moving parts. There tend to be more requirements with respect to proving identity for yourself, for your family members. There's medical processing that needs to go on. But hopefully, hopefully if the biometrics have actually been completed, and those were all done 8 months ago, hopefully that file will move forward. But we know that there have been significant cuts in terms of the overall numbers that we are trying to land in Canada for 2025 in terms of permanent residents in all categories, as well as we've seen a cut, like 3,000 immigration officers are going to be laid off. And so those processing times are probably going to get longer. And so make sure that you're checking your file, make sure that you don't see that there's any discrepancies or anything that you failed to do. Make sure that it's clear a family relationship, that you have birth certificates, marriage certificates, that those documents are all properly translated if they're not in English. Just make sure that you've done everything in your power to move that file along, and then hopefully it's up to IRCC to finalize processing.
All right. We've got a bunch of good questions funneling in here. Let's see here. So Kesh says, I have a chance of being selected for CEC draw, but concerned about my foreign work experience, which is 51 weeks, 4 days, just short 1 day to get the full 52 weeks. Do you think that would affect PR? And I had this conversation with someone just this week in a consultation. What are your thoughts, Alicia?
Yeah. And I had this conversation with somebody this week too. And it's so tricky because in her circumstance, she was one of the people that got a draw under that February 5th draw. And so she still has her arranged employment points. And so she has a really tough decision right now because we just know they wiped out those arranged employment points, but not for the people who've already been issued an ITA. So if she moves forward, she might be okay, but she's worried that the system gave her an invitation to apply too early, right? They gave her that invitation to apply before she hit her full 52 weeks because the system doesn't count days, it only counts the months. And so this is something where we would definitely want to talk with you and understand what's going on in your circumstance. Because for sure, the safest thing is to make sure that you have at the time that you got your invitation to apply, you had those full 52 weeks of work experience, because depending on whether you're looking at a CEC or an FSW, that's the minimum eligibility criteria for that class. So it's really important that you meet minimum eligibility criteria for the class. Sometimes people say, okay, well, I got the ITA. Let's say you got the ITA February 5th and your work anniversary was, I don't know, March 10th. Sometimes people keep that ITA, they gather all their documents, they make sure they hit that anniversary date, they've worked at least past the March 10th date, and then they wait to submit their EAPR until for sure they have the 52 weeks. But there is some risk in that, because it is possible that an officer says, hey, at the time of ITA, you didn't have the full 52 weeks. But it depends on your risk tolerance, and it depends on, you definitely want to make sure that you did not misrepresent. So the other thing that Mark and I always ask is, when did you create that express entry profile? And if at the time that you created that express entry profile, in your questionnaire in the Wizards, you actually said that you already had a year of work experience and you didn't, then that's a situation where it could be misrep, and we would we would definitely say avoid the misrep.
Okay, next question. Cyber Ninja says, is the general CEC still holding 80,000 in the quota? So I think what we're referring to is the this right here. So remember, these categories are just people who've submitted their express entry profiles, and these are their CRS scores. And so we don't know if these are PNPs. Well, if it's a PNP, it has to be up here, a nominated one. We're not sure if they're some of these could be federal skilled workers under the federal skilled worker program, and not just CEC. But the question here is general CEC still holding an 80,000 quota? Well, yeah, like.
I wonder,
Go ahead.
Mark, maybe Cyber Ninja means on the levels plan. Like maybe that's what they're referring to, is on the levels plan.
Maybe.
What's the CEC target figures?
I just
That's
pulled this
kind of
up
how
for a
I read
video
that question.
yesterday.
Cyber
Yeah, so if
Yeah,
we go
we're not
here,
sure what you mean here.
so
So
the in Canada focus here is CEC. So if this maybe is what you're referring to for the 2025 year, the target range, they could go lower, they could go higher. So in Canada focus is generally Canadian experience class, but it's also the other regional immigration pathways. Like I think is the Atlantic immigration program in this one, or does it have its own space? I think it's oh no, it has its
I
own
think it's right
space.
there.
Yeah,
Yep.
and so maybe the municipal ones. I wonder if that's agri-food, economic mobility. Maybe it's the new municipal programs are contained within here. But generally speaking, yes, this is the quota for CECs. Yeah. And then the federal economic priorities, that could include, FSW people outside who have the minimum requirements to hit the category-based draws. All right, good question, Cyber Ninja. Okay, Nisarj says, hey, Mark and Alicia, 505 CEC. What are the chances? I can't. I cannot pimp my scores up anymore. Leaning towards learning French. So, Alicia, this comes from yesterday when I was describing what was happening and giving advice to people, and I had said, you got to pimp your score up a little bit better. You're going to get drawn. And so now they're starting to use that little terminology there. So, anyways, so
Never do we recommend anything untoward, people. It's always just, making sure those scores are what they can be based on legitimate efforts on your language tests and education and everything else. But yeah, so French. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
so far the French points are there. The new Minister of Immigration is from Quebec. I think it would be surprising to have those French points go away if that's the current immigration minister, but who knows? There might be a change in government. We know an election's coming up, so it's hard to say, right? If that's your only chance at trying to increase your scores, then there's a little harm in trying to learn another language. Maybe it'll be good just to have you well-rounded, and it'll be helpful when you travel or when you're looking at root words. I know that sometimes the Latin words are always fun for just general comprehension of a few languages, all those Latin-based languages. So sure, there's no harm in trying to learn French. Will the French points, will those bonus French points, the 50 bonus points stay? We don't know, but so far they're there and they've not been removed.
Yeah. And that's like when you go back to the criteria, you guys, you'll see, like Alicia was talking, there's like 22 to 24 points for second official language. So if the first official language, you can get up to 136 points, even if they pull these points out and say we're not giving
Right.
50 here anymore. When it comes to the second official language points, you can see that there's up to 24 if you're single, essentially, and 22 a maximum. So even if you hit 5 or 6 in some of the abilities, you can still increase 1 or 2 points, and that may be the difference. So in a world where human capital is becoming ever more important, anything you can do to scrape just a few more points is going to be worth it in the long run. And then, of course, we've got a Brar here who's asking the same question and also says that they cannot pimp their scores anymore. So gotta love that. Oh, you guys are hilarious. All right.
And
Oh, yeah.
this is a
Sorry, Alicia.
conversation I had in a consult also. Like sometimes, we have the principal applicant and the accompanying spouse, and sometimes the accompanying spouse has only a high school education. And they say, it's not worth the 2 points, right? It's only 2
Yeah.
points to get an ECA
Yeah.
for a high school diploma. And so some people just don't bother with it. And now I think the game has changed, and those 2
Yeah.
points might make the difference between
It could.
getting an invitation to apply and not. And so, yeah, if you have a spouse who has a high school diploma, go and do
Yeah.
that ECA. Make sure
Yeah.
that it's equivalent to Canadian.
Yeah, do it. All right. Over on LinkedIn, tuning in, Shaista says, do you think in-demand not codes will get candidates a higher CRS score compared to other not codes? Well, maybe you can just talk a little bit about the category-based draws, because that's really what we're getting at here.
Yeah. All right. So the category-based draws basically have the opposite effect, Shaista. So they actually have the effect of pulling down the CRS scores. So if we go to the express entry rounds of invitations and we go down to the current categories, and you can see what they are: French, healthcare, science, engineering and math, occupations, tech, a little bit of tech, trade occupations,
Yeah.
and ag, very few, basically one, and then education. And what happens then is that the candidates who are going to get drawn in a targeted occupation have to meet basic eligibility. So they have to qualify either for CEC, FSW, or FST. They have to. And then in addition to that, layered on top, within the last 3 years, they have to have acquired at least 6 months of full-time continuous work experience in one of these NOCs, in one of the targeted NOCs. And because you're pulling now from a smaller subset of the population, it means that when they do a draw here, those CRS points are going to be generally lower than a CEC general draw. So maybe, Mark, if you go to like the previous category or the previous draws, we can see, especially for French, that there's a huge difference in terms of what is happening with these previous rounds. And to reiterate, we've not had a CEC draw since February 5th. The CRS score for a general CEC draw was 521. So we saw that 521 on February 5th. And then the only draws that have been happening have now been provincial nominees, so people who have that PNP nomination, which gives them 600 points automatically, and French. That's it. And I'm guessing they've been doing that because they knew that this points change was happening. They wanted to clear out as many people in the system who had those points, so that now that's not being factored in when the officers are going through their completeness check, and it's not something that they have to double check for completeness anymore. They don't have to go and get employment verification letters to try to prove that arranged employment. So once that clears out of the system, now that's going to have a huge draw, right? So this is where people who have category based are going to be big winners in this new system, because you're pulling from a smaller pool of applicants, which depresses the CRS score.
Yeah, exactly. Great question. Thanks for tuning in on LinkedIn. That's great. Okay. Maria says, if I admitted an express entry profile and listed my spouse as non-accompanying, but later she wanted to take advantage of the spousal open work permit, can she still be listed as non-accompanying? I talked about that at length.
Yeah, and this is something where we would definitely want to find out more about your situation. So, where are you physically? Where's your spouse physically? How many previous applications have you done to Canada? Did you disclose your spouse on all your previous applications on study permits or postgrad work permits or prior work permits? If your spouse is trying to do that spousal open work permit, I'm assuming that you're in Canada already on some sort of work permit or maybe a study permit. But the difficulty comes when if you try to capture more points as a principal applicant who's applying a loan, and then all of a sudden your spouse comes on that open spousal work permit, but you say that they're non-accompanying, immigration probably is going to worry about misrepresentation because they're going to say these two things do not go together, right? If you have a spouse, make sure that they're properly declared. If you're saying that that spouse is coming for a temporary work permit and you meet all the eligibility requirements to bring a spouse, so be careful with the requirements after January 21st, 2025. All those requirements have changed, so make sure that you're looking at what the new eligibility parameters are.
You bet. These guys, I don't know about these people watching this channel, Alicia. Tom says, Mark, you need to trademark it, please. I want to see a Pimp My CRS on your channel. LOL. And then Jimmy and Jimmy says, what is the government's obsession with French? Doesn't Quebec have their own program? And then Mary says, other question, if why bring people from outside just for them being francophones when they have a lot of hardworking people in Canada right now? And I don't know exactly. There's social and cultural motivators operating within the decision making for our annual levels plans. The desire to have French, as we're a bilingual country, to have French across the country makes perfect sense that you would want to encourage that. Ultimately, I just wish that they wouldn't mix it up with the economic equation. So, and what I mean by that is, and this is maybe for whatever happens after the election, I'll just point it out, that what they've done here is they've kind of put French on the economic side. So overall, they say they want French targets of this much, and this is outside of Quebec. Okay. But when it comes to the actual emphasis now, it's largely falling within these, although there are other Quebec skilled workers and businesses, they have their own program here. But the reality is, I just wish that they would put that more on the side of the other categories. I guess maybe there isn't. Maybe this is the only place that they can slot it. But I guess it's a fair question, is what I'm saying, and I've been fairly frustrated with it for the exact reasons that you've listed, Mary. And I guess we'll just have to see ultimately what if we have another Liberal mandate. If they're going to continue pushing French, because I think there's a lot of frustrated people, and it's the same thing for the out of status construction workers. When you're facilitating the permanent residence of people that have fallen out of status and have chosen not to abide by the temporary conditions of their stay, and you're rewarding them and their employers, when you have so many people that are in valid status wanting to follow the rules, but are now faced with the reality that they're not wanted. So I don't know if you have any extra thoughts on this. I've been more critical than I need to, I think, but it's a valid concern that people have.
Yeah, and I think the overall concern is what's going to be best for Canada economically, socially, culturally, but largely economically when we're looking at the economic categories of express entry and PR applications. And so this is where, we look to the economists and we look to the data and we look to what's been happening over the last 10, 20, 30 years with respect to the human capital of the economic immigrants that Canada is admitting. And I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, the Globe and Mail editorial board had also said, hey, let's go back. Let's go back to first principles and let's pick people based on human capital scores. Let's not pick winners and losers in these category-based rounds of invitations because it's not fair. And we want to make sure that people, like, we can't pick it perfectly. We don't have a crystal ball as the government to say exactly what's going to happen with employment trends in the world. And so the way to manage that risk is basically to pick people who are young, who have lots of education, who have fantastic language scores, maybe who speak French and English, because that might be a benefit, but not necessarily have those bonus points, who have a family member in Canada, right? So that's why we have those family member in Canada points for additional points as well, because then there's somebody that can help them get established and settled. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. We'll pull up a super chat here from Abhishek. He says, hi, Mark and Alicia. We are getting penalized on the age factor. Seems IRCC only is targeting students. What LMI exempt people do now? What do they do now? And this is one of the main things that I don't think the government really thought through when they just did a blanket removal of job offer points.
Yeah, legitimately. Like, I have a number of clients who are professionals, who are senior IT workers, who are managers or executives at companies. And you don't usually get senior in your career until you're over the age of 40 in some occupations. And so this is really going to penalize people who are over the age of 29, because we know that every year you're going to lose 5 points until you hit that 45th birthday, and then you don't get any points for age anymore. So for sure, this is a real concern. And it does seem a shame, because if you've been living and working in Canada, you've got a company that's supporting you on an LMIA or another employer-specific work permit, you've been senior in that company for some time, your points are going to be lower than somebody who's younger than you, usually.
All right, we'll go through just a couple more, then we'll wrap up today. So Vera says, I worked 1 week while studying full-time in Canada. Do I need to put this experience in my Express Entry profile?
So in your Express Entry profile, Vera, there's a difference between what you put in your profile for claimed work experience and what you put in if you get an invitation to apply in your EAPR application, because there you have something called a personal history section, and you'll want to disclose everything you were doing in your personal history. But if you are looking at your profile itself, you only want to claim work experience for which you can get points. And if you're studying full-time, you don't get points for Canadian work experience. So those two things are mutually exclusive. So if you're studying full-time, you don't get points for work, so you wouldn't list it in your Express Entry profile. But when you're doing your personal history, yeah, list that you worked as part of your personal history.
All right, I'll pull up the super chat from Saroj. And Saroj, I'm going to ring the little bell here, and I'm going to strongly encourage you that you book a consult, because Alicia and I are really not going to be able to give you direct advice on this. But he says, I applied for a work permit based on an LMIA, the LMIA number. So the LMIA got rejected. Should I inform IRCC? And when should I stop working? Also, 90 days has passed since the original permit expiry. Can I restore status after the work permit refusal? CEC 509. Yeah, Suraj. So basically, I think what's happened here is the work permit is still pending. I think he's still in maintained status, but this is the hard part, Suraj, is that we can't, we really need to get more details from you. But if an individual, generally speaking, if they have applied to extend their work permit and they have done it concurrently when the LMIA is being processed and they've included the LMIA file number, that concurrent processing often results in the work permit getting refused before the LMIA does. But in your case, if the LMIA was rejected and you still have that work permit still processing, you can continue to work under maintained status until a decision is made on that application. So ultimately, when that's refused, depending on if you had other applications submitted previously or if this is just your first extension, you will often have 90 days from the date of that refusal to restore if it was your first application. Sometimes people, they submit another restoration application, when the previous one, on the second go around, if it gets refused, often they say you must leave Canada immediately at that stage. But I don't know, Alicia, if you've seen individuals, in these types of situations who have they've just applied to extend their existing work permit and it gets refused. Have you seen situations where they've not been told they have 90 days to restore status? I haven't, but I don't know what your thoughts are on that. So, but book a
Yeah,
consult, Sarosh, book a consult.
yeah, for sure, book a consult, because it's too high risk. You don't want to be in a situation, your employer doesn't want to be in a situation where you're working without authorization. However, Mark is right. If you had a valid work permit and you submitted that work permit extension application prior to your original work permit expiring, you do have maintained or implied status to continue to work under exactly the same conditions as your first work permit, until you get a refusal on that second work permit application. However, ESDC and IRCC talk to each other, and they will know, of course, that the
Mm-hmm.
LMIA got refused, so you're on borrowed time. So now the problem is, well, you might get a refusal and a letter saying you've got 90 days from that refusal date to restore, but what are you going to restore to? Because unless your company goes out and gets another LMIA or gets that LMIA resubmitted and approved, the LMIA processing times right now are months,
Yeah,
like
off the
probably 10
charts.
months.
Yeah.
So if that got refused, there's no way that IRCC is going to wait for 10 months for ESDC to make a new
Mm-mm,
LMIA. So,
not anymore.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, you definitely want to reach out, book a consult, and we
Yeah.
can talk about what your options are.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, couple more quick ones. Panasar said, applied for spousal, open work permit got refused as my wife's program didn't qualify. She's studying masters and updated her DLI. The issue is her program not being a professional degree. Need advice on the next steps. That's a consult, Panasar. So please slide over and book a consult. We can try to help you with that. Zolo said, I studied in Canada, been working full time for 4 years, taking care of disabilities, work voluntarily without paid 5 overnights a week. Now I'm so sad they removed the job offer points. 390 CRS, and he says the company is LMIA exempt. Yeah, our heart goes out to you. So often we're seeing this. Okay, Uzo says if you have a police report valid for 3 months, example, got the report in February 19th and draws done in April. Do you think I need to do another, even though it is still valid till May? This is an important question because this is something that I cover within the Express Entry Accelerator course. We talk about these types of scenarios, but when it comes to the validity of a police clearance, Uzo, for the current one for the country in which you're currently living, it's valid for 6 months, and so just that's the base kind of understanding that a police clearance certificate is valid for 6 months for express entry purposes. However, if you've obtained that police clearance certificate after you left the country and you haven't returned, then generally speaking, they don't expire. But if you obtained it after you left and then you return back, there's a lot of miscommunication on in internet land. And I've seen officers go both ways. I've seen officers not be too fussed about a 1-week trip back to visit family. I've seen others who have issued procedural fairness letters that then we had to deal with. I always advise people that if they end up going back to the country in which the police clearance certificate was issued, if they ended up going back there and it is now longer than 6 months since it was originally issued, I always have them get another one. So I don't take any chances. There's just too many ways in which IRCC is just messing with people. All right. King Saul says, can I claim CRS points for a 1-month vacation? I went outside Canada to visit, but I was getting paid from my company for the whole duration. So Alicia, how far can we push this? So I have had situations where officers said, yeah, if it's paid vacation, then you can still count it as work experience. But how far do you push that envelope? Now, 1 month of paid vacation, that's a long stretch. And what do you think, Alicia?
Yeah, and there's some program guidance where they say, 2 weeks. So their example in the program guidance is 2 weeks of paid vacation when that's, vacation benefits for part of a full-time employee. that's probably reasonable. But we also know that you can't claim Canadian work experience for time that you're physically not present in Canada. And so this is the bigger issue, is that you're not even inside Canada and you have to disclose your trips. And so they're going to look at your travel history and they're going to look at your work experience. And this is where there's now risk. And so I'm with Mark. I don't want to take any chances for clients. I want people to know that for sure they're going to meet their 1 year, especially if it's their eligibility 1 year for either CEC, well, probably for CEC in your case. So I would say err on the safe side, make sure that you work another 4 weeks or 4.5 weeks or however long your exact month vacation was, so that you're sure that you're really close. And if it comes down to 2 weeks where you're paid vacation, that might be okay, but you want to err on the side of having more time of Canadian qualifying
Yeah.
work experience inside Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll wrap it up with Adolfo. Adolfo says, "Hi, Mark and Alicia. In a potential conservative government, do you think the French points could go away? Would a conservative government be much of a difference for immigration?" Well, I can tell you personally that prior to, well, let's say this past summer from 2024 and the fall until now, if these changes that the Liberals had not put in place didn't happen, I would have said, yes, there is a very strong likelihood the Conservatives would have done everything that the Liberal government has done. But now, I don't know. I'm not so certain. Ultimately, what will they do with French points? Well, they could. I think that's very likely that they say, well, we're not giving 50 points for French, but it's hard to say. And right now, it's interesting. I don't think immigration, because of what the Liberals have done, I don't think it's a wedge issue in the election anymore. It's not really something that is going to make or break a Canadian's decision now on whether or not to vote for one party over another. Because I think, ironically, they're very aligned. Apparently, if this is the new direction that the Liberals are going, if indeed it is, if they're not just intend to just flip back after they get elected, I don't know, but it seems like they're pretty aligned right now. So I don't know your thoughts, Alicia.
Yeah, like honestly, when the whole levels plan came out last fall, my take on it was that's what the Conservatives would have done with the levels
Mm-hmm.
plan. They would have reduced, they would have put a cap on temporary residents, and they would have reduced the overall level of permanent residents. And that's exactly what the Liberals did. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because of what's been happening globally. There's been pushback against immigration, but also there are concerns about housing, about access to benefits, about all sorts of things. And so basically, I think the Liberals already did what the Conservatives would have done. And
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Mark that that change has already happened. And now we've got bigger fish to fry, because now we're looking at existential risks, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Goreski says Liberals are not conservative. If you want conservative value, I'm sorry, you're going to have to vote conservative. Okay, sure. All right, guys. We'll leave it. We'll leave it with that. Thanks so much for joining today. This live Q&A with Alicia and myself. As always, this is sponsored by the Canadian Immigration Institute's Express Entry Accelerator course, which I've showed periodically. And I look forward to seeing all of you subscribers to the course tonight that are coming to attend the masterclass. And it is a really fun time, because when you connect in, it's more like a Zoom call, and people can turn their cameras on and we just talk. And I like getting more details, and we can dive a whole lot deeper into Express Entry than we can our live Q&As here on our live streams. And so anyone who subscribes to the course, I now am in the process of revising a few videos, you guys, because we no longer have job offer points. So those are that section, the particular lesson in here that relates to job offers is now going to be gone. And if I just log in quick here, I'll just show you. So there are a couple lessons that are directly impacted by the changes that the government has made. But fortunately for me, when I created the course, I did it by design, so that if the government did make changes, I would just need to change one or two of these 70 lessons in order to bring the course up to date. But if we go down through here and, all these modules, module 3 is all about the profiles. Module 4 is all about the APR. And if we go down to module 6, where it's all about documents, I have a whole lovely section on offers of employment. So for all intents and purposes, lesson 49 is going to be pretty bare, but all these resources and tools we have are they're still technically going to be valid to some extent, but only for the purposes of entry into the pool through the Federal Skilled Worker Program or maintaining whatever's needed for, say, a provincial nomination, etc. But yeah, so poor little lesson 49. You were such a good lesson. I'm sorry to see you go. Yeah, this is all available. And once you subscribe, then you will be you'll be able to come and join us and attend the master classes. And when you subscribe, you have access to all the changes for life. So there you have it. All right. And Alicia, we will wrap this up. We'll kick it off with our little song here. Let's see. I think I've got it set up. So we'll send you guys away with Welcome to the North is what it's called. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Snowy peaks and open skies, northern winds whisper goodbyes. Dreams take root where the maples grow, a land of promise where rivers flow. Welcome to the north, where the light shines so bright. Chasing every dream beneath the stars tonight. Every step you take, a journey to belong. Building futures here, where hearts grow strong. Lakes like mirrors, reflecting pride, from the Rockies to the ocean tide. Voices mingle in a tapestry, a world united in harmony. Welcome to the north, where the light shines so bright. Chasing every dream beneath the stars tonight. Every step you take, a journey to belong. Building futures here, where hearts grow strong. Borders fade as hope ignites, a new dawn rising in the endless night. Together we climb, hand in hand we stand. You're home now in this welcoming land. Welcome to the north, where the light